welcome to another Insider Notebook here on Bleacher Report. I'm James Palmer. This is a different time, a different day. We're going to use this moving forward. Set your calendars, put it on your iPhone. If you're one of those weirdos that doesn't like the blue, put it on your Samsung or whatever else you use that's not Apple, you crazy folks. We're going to be 2 o'clock Eastern every Tuesday moving forward, as opposed to our noon Wednesday slot. So make a note of that as we continue with this show each and every week at this new time. Again, I will always be going to the chat in between each and every topic. I know the chat's going to be pretty lively today. We have a lot of head coaching openings to get to. What could be next for those teams? What could be next for those coaches? As well as the NFL draft is coming up right around the corner. We're going to start talking about those top couple of picks, whose jobs are secure. We're going to kind of tell you what's happening there. Maybe some quarterbacks and some other players that could be potentially on the move and potential trade candidates, as well as Travis Kelce's future we'll get to at the very end of this. Okay, let's get moving very quickly because we have a lot to get to and there's a lot going on in this coaching carousel right now. We started this with a slate there of Kevin Stefanski, and he has parted ways with the Cleveland Browns. They have fired the two-time head coach of the year, and I was talking to a number of candidates around the NFL over the last several weeks, guys that believe they have an opportunity to be in this head coaching cycle, and everyone I spoke to was curious about Kevin Stefanski's future. Why were they curious about it? They were curious about it because they believe if he's available, that means he's going to be at the top of everyone's list. And that is true right now. Kevin Stefanski is considered, as I talk to people around the league, the number one candidate on the market. Nobody else has the credentials that he has. And everybody believes, and I think Jimmy Haslam would tell you this as well, the owner of the Browns, that he's going to succeed in his next location. It was essentially, to my understanding, just time. Everybody had got kind of worn out about everything that they have been through in their time there in Cleveland. Yes, I mentioned the success, I think 2 11-win seasons. There was also a 5-12 record this year, 1 playoff win while they were there. And so Kevin Stefanski ends up moving on. My understanding is he seems to be pretty rejuvenated about his possible prospects of landing somewhere else. At the same time, I think he does have the ability, and we'll see if he wants to be this, is to be selective in where he wants to go. I think he also has the ability to take a year off if he would like. Remember, Mike Vrabel did that, spent some time in actually the Browns building. The two are very close. Maybe he could have a conversation with Vrabel thinking, you know what, maybe this isn't the right opportunities for me that are available. He's already taking some interviews, but at the same time, I think everything's on the table for now, the number one candidate out there across the landscape of these teams looking for a new head coach. And to mention just time, that was an aspect of this. It's very interesting in a lot of people's minds that Kevin Stefanski was let go for everything that has gone wrong, including the worst trade in the history of the NFL, which was the Deshaun Watson trade, where they gave up 3 first-round picks and gave him a guaranteed contract that they are still on the books for. Last year of it is $46 million in cash guaranteed to him this year, but he has an $80 million cap hit. The Browns are going to have to slide some of that money out of there and kind of negotiate that contract to some extent to be able to operate this season. So everybody's kind of curious why Andrew Berry keeps his job and Kevin Stefanski doesn't. I will say this. Obviously, what happened with the last rookie class, which was outstanding. They had a rookie lead the team in passing, rushing, receiving, tackles. They really had a really great class, maybe the best in football. That is a feather in the cap of Andrew Berry. I think they need him to build on that if he wants to keep staying in the spot that he's in, but I think that helped him stay there. And also, a lot of owners around the NFL like some help when they're looking for a new head coach, and Andrew Berry is going to be a part of that. But I think you saw everybody. It's kind of, I hate to say it, very Browns, to have the head coach that you part ways with immediately become the number one candidate in the cycle, which is just kind of the way it went down, and it was just kind of time and ran its course. And if you're going to make that change, you're going to make that change now with 2 first-round picks coming up. The interesting part about it, and we'll get to these openings, but I want to get through these guys first about the Browns and what to keep an eye on with them. Jonathan Gannon also fired. This one kind of was a surprise to some people, honestly, because towards the end of the season, people started thinking he was safe. This is another instance, and it's funny that a lot of these times this does happen, where a change happens, sometimes for the course of change, but I think Michael Bidwell really believes that Jonathan Gannon's a good coach. And this was a young staff that built off of a very poor roster. They had 4 wins in their first year, 8 wins in their second year. This was the first year that when I talked to Gannon and others during training camp, it was we have an opportunity to go into free agency and build this roster a little bit more what we think. But the quarterback's a big question mark. Well, Kyler Murray goes down. You actually saw the offense operate better with Jacoby Brissett. A number of injuries hit this team as well. There was the hug that everybody's talking about. Very, very Fredo, very Godfather 2 there from Michael Bidwell. But when you lose 9 straight and you lose 14 games, the most in franchise history, I think that really is what sealed the fate for Jonathan Gannon and that group. We'll get to what's next for Arizona, but that's kind of essentially how it went down. A lot of people thought he was going to keep his job as the season was kind of going on because of the injuries, because of how early this was, but ended up not keeping it. Another man that a lot of people thought were going to keep his job, including people I talked to on that staff in Atlanta, was Raheem Morris. We knew for some time that Terry Fontenot, behind closed doors, most likely was going to be out. He is. The general manager's out. He had 1 year left on his deal. But Raheem Morris was signed through 2028. This was year 2, essentially. And they ended up cleaning house entirely. The situation in Atlanta is fascinating. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. There's going to be one search firm working on the general manager hire, a different search firm working on the head coaching hire, and Matt Ryan is slated, as of right now, nothing is official, to be the new president of football. What a fascinating title that is, but a new president of football, which will oversee both the head coach and the general manager and have the final say in what happens on the football side of things. But with Raheem Morris, that group thought that they really did enough down the stretch. They won 4 straight. They won that game against the Rams in a standalone game. Those things usually matter to owners. But people in that building, to my understanding, do believe that Arthur Blank, at 83 years old, is doing everything he can to try to get that city a Super Bowl, that organization a Super Bowl. Collaboration is kind of nails on a chalkboard to a lot of people around the Falcons, but that's what they're looking to do once again. But they had a search firm in there for 2 months, really evaluating everything prior to the end of the season, and it ended up being a full, cleaning of house. And we'll get to Atlanta and what happens moving forward there. So that's Raheem Morris. Then Pete Carroll is also, he's one and done. We had 2 first-year head coaches last cycle be one and done. Out of the 7 that were hired, Pete Carroll is the only one that's one and done here out of this group. This was interesting because usually Mark Davis takes a little bit of time. He's been through this a lot, a day or two, and then, makes the announcement of the firing of his head coach. Well, this one came rather quickly. They already fired Chip Kelly during the season. They fired special teams coordinator during the season, and he was there to bring in a different culture, to change things, change the landscape of what's going on within that entire building, and it just hasn't happened. And it just didn't happen, and they're looking to reset. The most fascinating part about this is Tom Brady being a part of that press release. When I talk to people around the league, that's the most important thing that really happened yesterday, that Tom Brady, who many people in that building believe is their boss, is now being put out in front with John Spytek, his old college buddy, who's the general manager of that team, that they're going to find that next head coach. They're going to be in charge of finding that quarterback. Brady looks to be taking on a much more, it seems, a role where it is more front and center than maybe it was just perceived from the public. And I think that's a big part of what's happening with the Raiders as they regroup from a standpoint of having the number 1 pick. What do they do with Max Crosby? I'll get to that. And what do they do with the head coaching spot? The most interesting aspect of it is that Tom Brady is a big part of what they're doing moving forward. But Pete Carroll out. A lot went wrong. There was just, as one source put it to me, the Raiders were an absolute mess. It really was. They wanted Ben Johnson really badly. Tom Brady worked hard to get Ben Johnson. He worked hard to try to get Matthew Stafford in free agency. Didn't land either one of those. One might be the coach of the year, one might be the MVP, but they didn't get any of them. And we'll see what kind of direction they go in. I'll get to that when we get to perfect job fits, which is kind of, I think, where we're at. I didn't forget anybody, right? We got Stefanski, we got Gannon, we got Carroll, we got Raheem Morris. That is in addition to the Giants and the Titans job. I don't know why the chat is not working in any sense. Maybe I can rejoin this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to rejoin this chatteroo to try to get things up and running for me because I don't see. Oh, there it is. It's back. Boom. Chat is back and up and running. I was wondering, I was like, where is everybody in terms of chats? Why won't the Bucks fire Todd Bowles? It looks like Bowles is safe. You got to remember, he just signed that new extension. He also has won 3 division titles in his first 3 years as the head coach there. Yes, epic collapse offensively. I don't think Baker Mayfield was healthy, by the way. I think that played a part in it, but there was essentially issues there. What's wrong with the Browns hiring Gruden? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think this hiring cycle, you do have to think outside the box. I think the Browns situation is fascinating, and I'm going to get to a little more intricacies of that. Word on John Harbaugh. I don't perceive anything happening there. I kind of don't. And that's kind of where it stands right now. Did they come up short? Certainly. Did they have a golden opportunity, I think, with the roster and Lamar Jackson in an AFC that's wide open? Certainly. But I just get the sense right now that it doesn't look like anything could be on the horizon for John Harbaugh and the Ravens parting ways. OC for the Commanders, this is the one that just happened, so let's talk about that a little bit. They relieved both their offensive and defensive coordinators. We know Joe Witt lost the play calling during the season, but there had been, I don't want to call it infighting, but certainly disagreements within that building about the way the offensive was being run with Cliff Kingsbury and others in that building. And that had kind of been brewing for a little while here. So to me, this was no surprise. Cliff had some options in terms of the head coaching ranks last cycle. He was very selective in kind of evaluating those. I'm curious how selective he is in this head coaching cycle, because he's probably a guy that's near the top now with some pedigree. And on that offensive side of the ball, there's very few offensive-minded head coaches that have play calling experience and work well with young quarterbacks that are part of really this candidacy that's out there. So keep an eye on Cliff and other offensive coordinator opportunities as well as head coaching opportunities. And now you need to regroup about what's happening in Washington with a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels and how you're going to regroup on that entire offensive side of the ball. I don't think there's any sort of front runner in terms of a leader in the clubhouse just yet. But I think there were some reports that Jane Daniels and others were kind of shocked by this. I'm shocked by that because I kind of knew what was happening. Who's the new DC in Dallas? They're going to have some options. I think that's an interesting group. Eberflus was something that we all had kind of known. I talked to some other DC candidates over the last couple of days who were all kind of interested in that position. I think you can have certainly. There's some names that are out there. Raheem Morris is out there. Jeff Ulbrich, who's done a good job with that defense in Atlanta, is a possibility as well. Brian Flores could be somebody that's a possibility. He is a free agent. I know the Vikings would like to bring him back, but he is a free agent technically. He's also in line as a potential head coach in some circles, even though he has this lawsuit going on. So I think that's fascinating what happens there. Sorry, I got to get through these. Fire McDaniel. It doesn't look like that's what's going to happen there. Could Gruden be Tampa's OC? I don't know if they're moving on from the Grizz. Fire Zach Taylor, please. He's going to be safe. We'll get to that. Let's get to some perfect fits here, and I'll get through more of these here. Clint Kubiak, Atlanta bound. He is going to be on their list, certainly. The Falcons have Ian Cunningham. That's kind of the top of their list right now, it seems. There's interesting connections there. Ryan Poles and Matt Ryan, who I mentioned Matt Ryan in that role of president of football, potentially. Almost certainly happening. They were in each other's weddings, and Ryan Poles is the GM there in Chicago. Ian Cunningham is coming in there for an interview with that group, and I think he's a guy that's been a top candidate for the last several years. He worked under Ozzie Newsome. He worked under Howie Roseman. He's done everything in that Bears organization. I think he's a guy that most likely is a very, very high candidate on anybody who's looking for a general manager. Atlanta, look at Clint Kubiak. I saw it on here. This position, to my understanding, is going to very heavily weigh in on what these candidates think of Michael Penix. That's going to be the biggest aspect of it. I do think Kevin Stefanski is an interesting name, considering the offense that he runs and the Kyle Shanahan type of offense that it's related to, that Matt Ryan had a lot of success in. If Matt Ryan has the final say, maybe those offenses and that thought process does play a part. They do have Clint Kubiak and Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator in Miami, also coming in as potential candidates right now. But it's just a really, really weird setup in Atlanta. I'm going to be fascinated to see how they go about this, because nobody's really gone about it like the way they are, with 2 different search firms and then a guy who's never done it before working in a building really getting the final say in Matt Ryan. Fascinating. With the Raiders, I mentioned the Tom Brady situation. I think that's a big part of this. in terms of what they want to do. Keep an eye on anybody with obviously New England ties to this. Is that Brian Flores? Is that Brian Dable coming in as the offensive coordinator? I don't know if he's in there as potentially the head coach, but I do think this is a really interesting one to look at when Tom Brady has the final say, essentially, and he's never really done anything like this before. There's been a lot of comparisons to John Elway. John Elway ran multiple businesses, negotiated contracts and deals for a decade before he took that job in Denver. He also ran an arena football team before he had that job in Denver. I don't think those two are comparable in all honesty, even though they're two of the best quarterbacks we've seen play at the NFL level. I think they do need to sort out Max Crosby's future. I'll get to that when I get to possible trades, but everything just went wrong there. I'd keep an eye on Vance Joseph being a cultural guy that gets an interview there as well. With the Browns, I think they have to look offensive football. I know there's guys that are defensive coaches, whether it's Jesse Minter or Chris Shula or some of these guys that could be high candidates. Do you want to lose Jim Schwartz and a side of the ball that just has it figured out right now? That's going to be the interesting aspect about what you want to do on the other side. My understanding is you need a clear-cut plan for what you're going to do at quarterback. And my understanding also is what your plan is for Shedeur Sanders does not have a very high impact on whether they're going to hire you as the head coach. I think he made really good strides. I think Kevin Stefanski played a part in that. I think he got better as the season went on. I think we saw signs of him being a serviceable NFL quarterback, but my understanding is what you think of Shedeur Sanders, I don't think makes or breaks you as a candidate specifically, but they have 2 first-round picks and the ability to do something with that job. And, really, really good rookie class that they just had. I think that's a big part of it. But there is a lot to figure out in terms of salary cap and some other things. We'll see what happens. I think they may link offense just because of Jim Schwartz. I want Flores in Cleveland. I think that's just fascinating. I'll say this. If you hire a defensive-minded coach, do you think Jim Schwartz is going to love that? Do you think he wants to stay? If you look at that side of the ball, I think they'd have to have a relationship or some sort of understanding that you're going to be the defensive coach, but you're going to let Jim Schwartz run the entire defense the way he's been running it. I think is just something that we need to keep an eye on. Kingsbury to the Raiders. Cliff was kind of sought after by, I think if Dallas would have went after him, I think he would have taken that. He wasn't interested in any other ones. He wasn't interested in the Raiders before. Maybe, and he gets a chance to pick the quarterback. I don't know. We'll see. I hope we can get someone like Mike Denbrock from as OC, Washington, Jane's sake. Okay. Get Stefanski to the Giants. I think that's the most appealing job out there right now with the way the Giants are built. I think Stefanski working with a young quarterback in Jackson Dart might be something that's rather appealing as well. Let's get to the Titans. I'll just say this real quick. They have interviews slated with Matt Nagy, Lou Anarumo, Kevin Stefanski, Vance Joseph, Raheem Morris, to my understanding. There might be more to come, but they can start working on some of those guys already. We know that Nagy has a direct relationship to Mike Borgonzi, who's the acting general manager there and has the final say. The two of them have talked about working together in the past. I know that firsthand, and so we'll see if Nagy has an inside scoop towards that. But I know they have a lot of different people they want to look at and a lot of different things they want to evaluate there. The Giants there, you mentioned Kevin Stefanski. I think Vance Joseph's been added to the list of people they'd like there. Joe Shane's going to be kind of running that whole thing. And then with the Dolphins, the GM spots, RJ Gillian has gotten an interview. Tariq Ahmad, Josh Williams. You see these 49ers ties with some of these guys. Those all 3 of them are, tied to the 49ers. Remember, Mike McDaniel was there for some time. Alex Halaby is also the assistant general manager for the Eagles. Obviously, all the time he spent with Howie Roseman. He's a bright guy with a Harvard education that a lot of people like around this league. And John Eric Sullivan is also an interesting one. I think they're going to have an interesting dynamic there in how they do it. I think their cap guy and Brandon Shore is going to be kind of elevated in the way he operates, and then that's going to work next to the GM and then the head coach. It's just there's going to be a shuffling of how things are done, I believe, in Miami. Okay, Dolphins should have hired Don Struck 20 years ago. They have 5 Super Bowls I know. Okay. Swap Tomlin and Harbaugh. That would be fun to watch. Yeah, we'll still see. We're still not entirely solidified on what's next for Mike Tomlin. We'll just say he is not going to get fired. I don't think there was ever a plan to fire Mike Tomlin. If he wants to depart and take a year off, as the Steelers are looking like they might be resetting things, still, I believe a possibility, but nothing is secured right there. A lot of fire Todd Bowles in here, by the way. Defense played really poorly down the stretch, and they pretty much collapsed. I was talking to a GM the other day that said, man, just they were gift wrapped that division and kind of blew it. Jobs that are secure. I got to get moving here. Joe Shane He's locked in there right now. Unless something dramatic happens with a candidate for the head coaching position wants to bring their own general manager and they blow the doors off of everyone involved. But I know he's really helping John Mayer and the rest of that ownership with this search, and he's been a big part of it from when they parted ways with Brian Dable during the season. The Colts, they're keeping both Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. I think they understand, and I think Carly Gordon, the acting owner now, who's Jim Irsay's daughter, understands what type of attention Shane Steichen would have gotten if he would have been made available. When I mentioned the lack of play calling, experienced offensive minds that could be potentially available, so they hang on to Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. I think Ballard's probably seat is a little bit hotter than Shane Steichen's. I think 2026, very important for both men to kind of keep this thing going as well of a start as they had with the collapse. I think this is like a one more year. Let's see what you can do for us. But we always had our eye on it because new ownership is always different. We know the ownership in Cincinnati, and Duke Tobin doesn't have a GM title, but essentially the GM and Zach Taylor are both keeping their jobs. Now, Zach has 2 years left on his contract for all you Bengals fans that are, knowing how the way Mike Brown operates with contracts and things like that. Joe Burrow still has a lot of faith in Zach Taylor, so that's part of this as well. But they are both staying there, and Zach Taylor announced he's not making any changes to his staff, which I thought was kind of interesting. Side note, we also probably have seen the last of Trey Hendrickson in a Cincinnati Bengals uniform. Mike McDaniel looks like he's staying right now. I think that will be evaluated in 2026, certainly. But I believe he is probably locked into that spot. He even said that he might be in some sort of assistance for the general manager position. I mentioned John Harbaugh, where that stands. Could there be a change at OC and Todd Monken? I think there's a possibility that that could happen. I think Zach Orr at DC stays. Man, were they bad at the beginning of the year, but could they be adding some other voices maybe within the building or making some changes personnel-wise? I think they're definitely maybe having those conversations, but I don't think there's a reason to believe that John Harbaugh is going to be fired. I just don't see that happening. I don't rule anything out. He only reports directly to Steve Bisciotti, the owner. So that conversation is between the two of them. But I just don't see that being a change. All right, offseason trade candidates. I think this one's kind of fascinating. Tua Tagovailoa most likely looks like he's played his last down in Miami. I think it's interesting when he says a fresh start would be dope while he's in the locker room of the Miami Dolphins. He's always handled these situations very interestingly, whether it was from his interactions with Brian Flores to how he entered the, going public with the player-only meetings. Just some of these things are just always kind of interesting, and he seems kind of sensitive to some of those things. I don't see how this all transpired, and he wants to stay there. Now, they'll have dead money over 2 years of roughly $100 million. He's guaranteed over $54 million this upcoming season. I think they can work around that in some sense. It is a smaller percentage of the cap than what the Denver Broncos had to deal with cutting Russell Wilson, even though it's a larger number than what Russell Wilson's was. It looks like he could be in a situation to where maybe they eat some of that money and end up trading him elsewhere, and he's either a bridge quarterback. There are some people around the league I've talked to that think his style of play and the way that he plays the position and with the concussion history, it's difficult for him to be successful moving forward against the defenses in the NFL the way they play. I would keep an eye on Max Crosby just for this reason. This season ended differently than we've ever seen in the past. Do I think there's a very strong possibility he comes back and he's the cultural tone setter in that locker room that he is with the new coaching staff, and he's leading extra weight room sessions, and he's leading that defense and leading the entire roster in the ways that he's done it in the past? Certainly. But if you're in a full reset like they are with the number one overall pick and a potential new head coach coming in that will see what they want to do you want more capital and you part ways from Max Crosby? I wouldn't rule out them at least listening to different trade offers that are there for Max Crosby. Kyler Murray looks like he's certainly done in Arizona. This is another quarterback that teams around the league are fascinated about. Is he going to be a bridge guy? He's owed $36.8 million next season, another 19.5 if he's on the roster on March 15th. That's most certainly probably not going to happen. Can they trade him? I think they're going to look into it. Could do the same thing as the Dolphins. They could look into that as well. Where does he land, though, is the fascinating aspect of it. We know all of the different things that have involved Kyler Murray. We also know he can play at a high level at times. Stretches we've seen it. So that's just a very fascinating person to go and kind of take a look. I'm not really seeing chats anymore. Maybe it stopped doing the chat thing again. Let's try it. Seems like it just keeps crapping out. Boom! Zach Orr is our curse. It's weird, guys. This has like been an issue going back and forth. I don't know. Zach Orr better not be coming back. I think he might be. I do think he's a young coach that they do like. Please, someone hire a softly used Kevin Petula. That's going to be interesting. Lamar news. I'll always, chat Lamar news. I think this offseason is going to be fascinating. I would be shocked if teams organically didn't kind of approach the Ravens to see what's going on and to see what type of trade offer would be available, as they're going to probably go through a contract negotiation this offseason. We saw flashes of vintage Lamar in that game, but just this year with just the injuries and everything that's gone through, we have to remember how contentious it was last time these two sides negotiated. So we'll see if they can get through it this time around. I do think they know how good he is, but I do think teams are going to be poking and prodding this time around compared to last time where they didn't interfere much. I think teams will be interested in making their voices heard. Tua is through. There's definitely some people in the league that think that. Brian Flores doesn't seem like he'll get a head coaching job because of his NFL lawsuit. Same. I don't think that's the case. If I mentioned the Raiders as a possibility, the Raiders have never cared what the league thought. Al Davis never cared what the league thought. I don't think Mark Davis does either. I don't think the Browns have cared what the league has thought. I don't think the lawsuit that's ongoing, maybe it affects his position and his standing with some teams. I don't think all teams, and I don't think he's like blackballed for a head coaching job by any stretch there at all. Where are we at? All right, draft targets. Let's go through some draft targets. We'll go through just the first three, and I think we're going to have quarterbacks again, which makes it kind of interesting because when I go through this here co-pilot here, I was curious what was going to be the situation if we wouldn't, if we're going to have quarterbacks again. How long has it been since we've seen a top five without quarterbacks? So I asked Copilot, how many NFL drafts since 2010 was a quarterback not taken in the top five? Well, according to Copilot, only two NFL drafts since 2010 have not featured a quarterback in the top five. Man, I bet you remember them, huh? 2013 and 2022 were the 2 years since 2010 we have not had a quarterback. This is not going to be one of them, folks. I really do believe the Raiders, I haven't drafted a quarterback in the top 10. They've done it once in the last 60 years. That sounds fascinating. It was Jamarcus Russell. Obviously didn't go well. You need a full reset. A lot of people think this is Fernando Mendoza. Some people think it could be Dante Moore if he does declare. I think there's a very good chance, though, that the Raiders go quarterback with one. I'm fascinated to see how they evaluate this. I'm fascinated to see how Tom Brady evaluates it. I mentioned the comparisons to John Elway earlier. That was always the Achilles heel of John Elway. He couldn't evaluate quarterbacks. And oftentimes people say when you're very, very good at something, the best in the world, it's hard for you to understand why guys don't get certain things at that same position. It was always why some of the best hitters in baseball were bad hitting coaches. Well, John Elway couldn't understand why certain guys couldn't do things that he can do. I do think that's what the Raiders are looking to do. I do think there's a long way to go with these quarterbacks before we figure out exactly what's happening with them. I think it'll be interesting that you do have to go into this approach. If you're going to take a quarterback at 1 and say you're the Raiders, or a quarterback at 3 and say you're the Jets, I don't know if you're getting a top tier level talent. I think you have to understand that if you make that pick, you might be getting a top 10 potential quarterback, top 15 potential quarterback. You have to be realistic with what you're getting. Can you win with that? Certainly. But I don't think you're getting some sort of record-breaking type of talent. Good players? Certainly. Let's go to the Giants. I think they're in a position where they can certainly trade out if somebody's very interested in the quarterback that doesn't go number 1. They are in a great spot with the core nucleus that they have. A new coach coming in, but at the same time, you do always have to remember this new coach that comes in, he's going to be asked about Jackson Dart, asked about his opinion for Dart. What if he doesn't love Dart, but he's the coach that they love and he has his eye on somebody else in the draft? I think that still has to be weighed in there, but I think the Giants are in a very good spot at 2 that they still could be able to trade out and get some more capital if they still fully believe in Jackson Dart, and a lot of people in that building certainly do. I think the Jets at 3, we know they're looking at quarterback, but I don't think they have to rush it. I think Darren Muji knows that he's in this for the long haul. Their general manager, with the picks that they collected in this draft and the number 1 picks that they collected in 2027, you have to remember that they specifically wanted some of these picks in their trades to be part of the 2027 draft class, not the 26. We all know about the draft class in terms of quarterbacks that could potentially be there in 27. They could punt on a quarterback. They have 2 first-round picks in this 2026 draft class. I don't think they're forced into a quarterback. Obviously, they'll do a ton of homework on them, but the way their draft is set up in 27, I think allows them to be a little bit more flexible. I'll say this on Travis Kelce very quickly, and then I'll get to what's going on with the rest of the chat, which seems to keep dying, and I got to keep getting back into it, which is kind of fascinating to me and kind of frustrating. But I've covered Travis for a long time and had a lot of conversations with him. I don't know if he knows if he's done. I don't know if anybody around him knows if he's done. It has some of that feeling to it. It had that feeling last year, though, and he decided to come back because of how disappointing the season was. He is different in terms of contract this year as opposed to seasons past. They have to figure that out and sign a new deal. But I will say this. He was probably better this year than he was a season ago. He still understands how to get free and get open. I've had a number of conversations with people in that building about how, yes, he's not the same athlete who is at that age at the tight end spot, but he still has the ability to be more creative in how he gets open. He wins earlier in routes. All the steps, none of them are wasted. He always finds ways to create a little bit of separation, and he's also so valuable in that building. And you may not have Mahomes around to really run practice as hard as he works. It's a big part of the why they've had that success in Kansas City. I think he can still play. I think he knows he can still play. There is that other side of things where there's so much waiting for him, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's everything that's there. That's all there. He's going to figure out whether he wants to still go. I know he put himself in great shape and he loves being around the facility. I put that part in there as well. What do we got? Giants should go get the Ohio State safety. That defense would be great. Man, Caleb Downs, we'll see how high he can go. But this is a rare, rare player. I think what you've seen from the safety position and the importance of the way that that position has changed this year. The number of teams that are playing the big nickel, essentially three safeties on the field instead of putting on another corner. Nicky Emanwari up in Seattle, I think shows the importance of that type of player. His play in Seattle in that defense might play a huge role in how high Caleb Downs goes because sometimes safeties obviously are not taken that high. He deserves to be taken that high. He is that talented. Giants are picking. Oh yeah, sorry. Giants are picking at 5. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, that was my mistake. I was looking at something different. What's this? Arch Manning, smart of him to say, 2 soundtrack, #1 pick. He was always going to stay. Arch Manning was always going to stay. I think that's a big part of this in terms of the 2027 slot. Both his uncles stayed. He stayed. That's essentially was always going to be the plan for what he was going to do. And I think that 27 class in a lot of people's minds is going to be better than this one. But again, we're still very early in the evaluation process. Let's see. Raiders need more than a quarterback. If they get one, they have to surround him with great offensive minds as coaches. I think that's a need. Offensive line for the Raiders is extreme need. Yes, you have Ashton Genty. Yes, you have Brock Bowers. Both very talented players. I think you had an issue with the way the offense was run. You had an issue in protecting the quarterback. You need to have a full-scale plan for that quarterback. Are you going to need to hit on some other spots? For sure. Do they have a lot of money for free agency? They certainly do. So you're going to need to hit there as well if you're flipping this thing for the Raiders. Brady did say to stop drafting, then starting quarterback in the first round. I would say this. Brady, I believe, also did not want Sam Darnold, and he was more okay with Geno Smith. And I think Sam Darnold's done okay. Jamarcus got me in the whole O-line, Concordance 11. Deion Sanders to the Browns. I don't heard that at all, but that's, hey, let's have the Sanders family run things over there. Okay, I think we're Tua's hip injury is only getting worse, and one more concussion, bye-bye. I think that also played a role, a lot of people think, in I'll mention that. I'll answer that question too. Played a role in the way that they kind of called that offense and played a role in kind of the way they played offensive football because of the concussions and the way you have to play with Tua. I see this one. Any Davis Webb news, Vance Joseph landing spots. VJ's getting a lot of love. I was just in that locker room the other day. There's a lot of players that do believe VJ's going to land a job. They'd hate to see him go. But I think it'll be interesting if he does leave, to my understanding, who leaves with him. That would be fascinating. And Davis Webb is a very interesting name. A lot of teams are very curious about Davis. I wouldn't be surprised if he got an interview with the Giants due to his ties there. But he checks the boxes of being a former quarterback, being in that quarterback room, Also has called plays during the preseason this year, and I told he did an outstanding job. But he also is so really strong in the analytics side of things and the math side of things and kind of that nerdier side of offenses. He kind of does both very, very well, which makes him very intriguing. He is a bright, bright young coach. I wouldn't be surprised if some teams are curious about Davis Webb in this cycle. I don't know if he lands a job, a head coaching job, but I think somebody's going to be very interested to talk with him about what the future could hold for Davis Webb. Okay, we've gone a little long. Appreciate everybody for joining me. I'll try to figure out what's going on with the chat because I'm just like missing a lot of what's going on. Is Gannon a DC option? I think he certainly is. Gannon is a really, really good coach, and I think he has the opportunity to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll continue with this, remember, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time, and I will be back with you in a week, and maybe we'll have some more answers about what's kind of going on, and we'll get to maybe some playoff football talk as well. But with so much going on with the coaches, that's where we wanted to have our focus. So everybody, take it easy. See you in a week.